Welcome to the Punk Rock Drummers Podcast, Season 2, Episode 1.
Yeah, man. Well, we'll talk to someone who is or wasn't a punk band or was inspired by the music. Today's guest is the one, the only Tim Baltes from Kino, as you may know him.
That was a funny guy.
Oh, dude, this was great, man. I think this is going to be one that not just drummers will enjoy. Tim opened up about a lot of like personal stuff, which is cool, man. I mean, there's so many podcasts with him on it talking about like the YouTube and the Instagram stuff, but this is one I think everyone could enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it has its highs and its lows, which are all very good. But he's super funny, and that's how I discovered him, was on Instagram. He's doing those drum covers where he would basically start out every song and it would be like a cover song, and he would always start it out with the Phil Collins, In the Air Tonight. Do. It didn't matter what song it was.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he's grabbing a microphone and yelling and screaming at it, and then it's over.
Yeah.
So you just never really knew what you were going to get every time you watched one of his videos. So that's how I discovered him.
Yeah, man. And I've known Tim, I don't know, probably a couple of years now. We've always managed to stay in touch. It might not be constant, but we definitely chat here and there. And he's just a nice person. Tim's just a good dude.
Extremely down to earth.
There was one or two things that we didn't cover, which I forgot to mention more, is he has a ton of drumless tracks on Bandcamp, and I think they're on YouTube too. It's just Tim Baltes drumless tracks, and they're all set fully instrumental, no drums, to a click track, but they're all at really odd like tempos, not even. So if you guys are out there looking for stuff to play along to, definitely hit those up. I think they're free, but you can also donate to him, which now that he is in France and looking for work, you could probably use the help there for sure.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Oh, they're great. They're great too. And I would be remiss to not mention, we did talk about briefly about Chicago punk, and I can't believe I left Los Crudos out, one of the greatest hardcore bands of all time. So yeah, just wanted to throw that in there.
Very cool.
You're very cool.
You're very cool.
You're cute. What? Dude, you always make it so fucking weird, man. Why do you do that?
I don't know.
Can't not be creepy for 5 minutes, man.
I just have that face.
You do. You have the face of a creep. What? These are great intros, but yeah, man, super fun. Like I said, Tim really opens up a lot, about his personal life and health and the future of him drumming in general. So it's a rad one. We are going to officially promote our non-official sponsor, Sleeved Washers.
Oh yeah, great.
Yeah, you
great.
Have your little bag to dangle.
I can do a visual here for the YouTube watchers. Yep.
YouTube washers.
Bag to dangle.
Oh, they match your fingernails.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Yeah, I know everyone's probably tired of hearing me say this, but that product is awesome. And I don't usually back a lot of products, but I have my drums right now, my toms tuned super low, and they're almost like just above a wrinkle, and they have not dropped out of tune since I did it about 2 weeks ago. And I play at least a couple minutes every day. So great product. You can get those at sleevewashers.com. And
I've got a Punk Rock Drummers merch website or store in the works. Yeah. So if you're watching YouTube, you can see I've got a hat. It's kind of dusty. Got a hat right here that I got earlier in the year. Logo designed by Christian. Very cool. So the store, I'll put a link in the description and all that stuff, but if you want to find it, I can tell you suburbanscreen.com/punk rock drummers will take you to the store, but I'll put a link in the description.
Shout out Parkway Music for giving me this lovely microphone that makes me sound so much more handsome than I actually am. And yeah, you can hit them up, parkwaymusic.com. The Reverb stores are bad too. So thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. With that being said, Matthew, is there anything else you would like to say?
I think that's it for now.
Cool. Let's get into it.
Enjoy the episode.
Later, nerds.
Bye.
We have a Tim.
Hey, Tim.
What's going on?
How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you boys doing? How's your morning going in America?
We're
Wonderful.
good.
Yeah.
Matt's an hour earlier than I am, so
About 4 p.m. right now.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Christian did mention that earlier.
we gotta get this moving so you can have your supper.
They don't eat supper till like 8, 9 o'clock over here. Brutal.
Wow. Is it called
Preposterous.
supper over there? What's it called? What's the French word?
Diner.
Dîner.
Essentially dinner, but it's like going Target.
Oh,
Dinner,
yeah.
diner.
Yeah. Okay. That's very interesting. Dîner. Of course, I say
How are
it
you-
like, white guy from Texas. Dîner.
Hey, I went to the old Waffle House diner.
Oh wait,
Hey, that's
but
pretty
now
good.
I'm curious. Did you grow up? Was it called dinner, Tim, or supper in your house?
In Wisconsin. Well, I guess usually dinner or din.
Mm-hmm.
If it was real fancy, it might have been supper, but usually supper. The only time I ever heard supper, because it was a Wisconsin thing, is we had supper clubs. But that was like, that would have been a thing like Northwoods, real North Wisconsin. Sometimes on the lake, we have one in Kenosha, but it was like diners that kind of stayed in the style of the late 50s into the 60s. You can think like, gangsters, Frank Sinatra, that kind of thing vibe, where you go to eat. The one by us had private rooms. So if you were going to have a business meeting or a under the table kind of business meeting, you could have a room with a door that was shut, and that's
Or
where you
whack
and your
somebody.
homies could do the business. Yeah, it was. Food was good, but it's a vibe. It's a vibe. But that's the only time I ever heard supper.
What about you, Matt?
Dinner.
Dinner. And
Dinner,
my dad's the only one that ever says supper, and it weirds me out. It
I think
makes
it
me
was
feel
kind of
icky.
interchangeable. I
don't
think we
like it.
used both, but dinner was more dominant, I think.
We had some din-dins though, Tim. Just to
Good.
That's what I say to my cats. Din, Mr.
Well, that's what we-
Bigglesworth.
that's what we call it when we'd have cat food for dinner.
I like chicken. I like liver.
Jeez, this is getting off to a good start.
Oh no, we are off the rails already.
It's all right.
Well-
It's good. It's good.
I was able to sneak my Adderall in before we started, so it should kick in a few minutes. So we'll be
That's good.
we'll
I
be
haven't had my
good.
coffee, so
I'll
it's
just
okay.
be on a government list from now on. I shouldn't have said that. Any farts. Tim, do you prefer Tim? Do you prefer Timbo?
Yeah. Timbo Baltes. Yeah, that's about it.
Sweet. Cool. Well, let's jump in with the most generic question. When did you start? When was the beginning of Tim?
When was the beginning of Tim? I was born.
Oh, it's frozen
South-
again.
Oh, do we need to wait? You want to wait and do a little redoing here, or what are we doing? How punk rock is the podcast?
Hey, freezing is fine. I
Okay.
don't know. It was doing this yesterday a little bit too, but I don't understand. I have good internet here, so I think it's Christian.
Okay. Well, we'll blame Chris.
Let's just
We'll
blame
Chris. That's good.
Christian.
Yes. So
Well,
did you
I can
answer the
edit-
question and I
can
just didn't
edit-
hear it?
I can edit that in. So ask him again.
Okay, so yeah, again, pretty generic question, but around how old were you when you started playing?
So I started playing piano when I was 8, and then I started going to punk rock shows when I was 10, which would have been the year 2000. And then, I grew up between Milwaukee and Chicago, so we would have a bunch of punk rock shows in church basements and whatever other halls we could rent. But because of the church basement thing, my church was one of the places where you could rent in town to have punk rock shows. So I would go to a lot of those. And so me and 3 other guys I went to church with started a punk rock band when I was 12, and I played bass in that. And then finally I started playing drums at 15. But between 12 and 15, I was that kid at band practice who, if you guys grew up playing drums, you'd probably remember this kid who'd be in the band and he didn't want to play his instrument. He only wanted to play the drums. And so I'd always tick off my buddy Kevin, because the second he'd go to take a pee break or whatever, I'd be behind those drums and he'd come back and want to smack me.
Yeah. Yeah. Very protective of the drums at a young age. Now it's like, don't hit my cymbals too hard and we're fine.
Were you only playing in the air tonight? That drum fill every time you got on the drums? because that would irritate anyone, I think.
He had 4 toms. It was like 3 up and 1 down, and
Yeah.
I could have done that. But honestly, I don't even know what I would have been playing before I was, drums wise. It was, probably pretty basic beats and little fills and things. But I think it was one of those things where once I was forced to get behind a kit, it was like, okay, this is. I think my heart was trying to tell me that's where I needed to be. And then, I got there and it was just like, okay, yeah, this is right. And now here 20 years later, here we are.
The heart wants what the heart wants. So you said 10 years old you're going to shows? And
My
were
parents
those
got
like
divorced. Yeah.
okay.
Essentially, my parents got divorced. And instead of, giving a babysitter some money for me, I was the oldest of 3. My mom would give me the 2, 3, 4, $5, and I'd take my bike or get dropped off by her and go to a punk rock show. And I'd be gone from 5 till 10 or 11 at night. Didn't have to worry about me. And so, but we had such a thriving scene. And I think because it was not all the time, but there were a lot of shows that happened in my church's basement, and the pastors were there. The youth pastor was there with her husband, and I was close with them. And even my uncle would I don't know what the term would be. I guess he'd be like a bouncer. He would, kind of chaperone some of these concerts and stuff, and he saved me from getting my butt whooped by older kids once or twice. And so I think that probably is why my mom felt a little more comfortable with me doing that stuff.
What were some of the bands you were seeing at the time? I mean, I know Chicago's like Alkaline Trio and Smoking Popes and stuff, right?
Sure. Yeah. So I wish I would have seen it, but I know Alk Trio and Lawrence Arms both played shows at different venues that I wasn't able to make the shows that they played in town. That would have been incredible. Smashing Pumpkins had played in Kenosha at one point. But my first show when I was 10, there were some local acts. There was a band called Hired Geeks, which was like kind of this third wave ska thing. And there was a band called All Saran Kings. They were the first opener. And, it's interesting because, obviously you wouldn't know this, but, in the scene, it was being that young. There were guys about my age playing in these bands. And one of them from that little Al Saran Kings band, one of them was a guitar player and a songwriter who lives in Nashville now. Another guy he was a bass player at the time. He still writes original music, playing piano in town. And so a lot of these guys continued on. But then some of the big bands that were at that first show I went to, there was a regional band. Oh, I'm losing the name of it now. The big one was Goaty Hook, which was sort of they were Christian punk rock, but it was like.
I grew up in that scene too.
Oh, did you?
The Tooth and Nail scene. Yeah. We played at our church, and we played at a church called God's Place. And so it was like MXPX, Goaty Hook, 90 Pound Wuss. I joined the band Squad 50 that came through. They were one of those like Christian ska bands. So yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you.
It was cool because it was still at an era where Christian music simply meant essentially that you weren't going to swear, and hopefully you weren't going to try to be a violent person or incite violence, right? So it wasn't there wasn't any sort of what do they call it? Proselytizing. That's a hard word to say. They weren't trying to make you a Christian. They weren't trying to preach that sort of thing. Yeah, but I don't know. Thinking about Christian ska, another band that was from the era, Five Iron Frenzy. I think I still have it in my stuff somewhere. I have a gift that a friend of mine who I grew up with got me. That was the whole band signed a T-shirt to me for my birthday one year, which was kind of cool.
That's awesome.
You know that all too well, that stuff.
Yes, yes. We played with them in Denver. This was probably 99. A long time ago.
It was a good era. It was a good era, though, for that stuff.
It was.
I remember you guys had Mike Palumley on, and I think about that stuff all the time. Like Mike, Rob's another guy, Rob Kellenberger, who's from the area too. I don't know if you know that name at all, but I grew up with a lot of stuff from Asian Man Records.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the first CDs I bought because it was cheap and it had a ton of music was Mail Order for the Masses. It was like a little $4 compilation CD. You got like 25, 30 songs on it from different artists. And before you could really, when this was back in an era when it took me, the first song I ever downloaded was Police Truck by Dead Kennedys. It took like 20 or 30 minutes to download a really terrible sounding MP3. So it's like, okay, I'm going to take my $4 and go buy a compilation CD. So it exposed me to a lot of this music where, hearing Mike Plumlee play on some of those Alkaline Trio songs. Rob Kellenberger was another guy from the North Burbs who played with like Colossal and Slapstick. Um, but it was all this sort of music was happening in the area too. But I love that era of music. It's totally, totally, totally formative. Even though I wasn't playing drums at the time, I think it's totally formative to the way that I think about arrangement, song arrangement, music theory, and the way that I approach playing the drums now with anything, whether it's pop, rock, hip hop, or anything else.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Asian Man Records, man. You just brought me back. That was probably what, 96 or 7, I think, whenever they were
Oh yeah,
putting out those compilations. I remember I had a big Asian Man sticker on my kick drum back then.
that's awesome.
Yeah, man. So yeah, so you and I were kind of listening to all the same things back then and exposed to the same bands, I guess what's that, Tooth and Nail
Mm-hmm.
bands. Yeah. And Asian Man Records. Yeah. That's funny.
Hopeless Records.
Yeah.
Hopeless was another big one too. I think this is something that was really special about that era for people who were either music listeners or musicians who continued on into today is because it was it was a time when I think, pre social media, we had small communities where you could really get into the music. I still remember all those bands, that I saw when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. I
Mm-hmm.
can still hear some of those songs in my head today, and I haven't listened to them in probably, 15, 20 years. But, it's also sprouted bigger communities and bigger scenes across the entire United States. Asian Man Records is a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Parks started this thing and he had his bands going, the Chinkies, Skank and Pickle, some of these other projects that were just like, to me as a 11, 12, 13 year old, I was exposed to music like um, anything Steve Albini was doing, a lot of stuff on Discord Records and that sort of thing. So it was kind of the weirder stuff, and to hear Skank and Pickle doing this ska thing that was so different. Again, it just like opens your mind to punk rock can be anything.
Sure.
It can, Hail Hopeless Records, Adam and His Package. I that's one band I go back to a lot too. This was during an era pre-social media. I remember listening to Adam and His Package on a Hopeless Records compilation. I got one of his CDs, and somehow I found the dude's email. And I emailed him. I said, "How are you making this music and performing this music?" Because it was just him, and I didn't know what the heck a sequencer was at the time. But the guy was really nice and emailed me about, I use this little music sequencer and blah blah blah. But that sense of community, both where you were locally across the United States, it just punk rock culturally permeated it all across the entire country, and I think it's so special because it's something that culture, even though it's so different today, is something I really, really try to foster because it's something I love so much. I think we don't get anywhere in life without the people around us. Christian and I connected the first time on a phone call on a Saturday morning when I was going for a walk, and we were talking about a Premier snare drum, or not Premier, precision snare drum that he had.
Yep.
And we were trying to figure out, I don't know what the heck it was or what was, something like that. But it went from social media to phone,
Mm-hmm.
continued phone calls, and now here we are on a podcast together.
I wrote you a couple years ago. I wrote you maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and you wrote me right back. And you probably don't remember, but I think I was asking about your drum sound, and you said room mics. You said room mics. You got to have room mics. And I was like, yes, that's what makes them sound so good. So I've been obsessed with learning how to properly mic in my studio and everything. And room mics and every time I hook up my room mics, I think about you.
It's so awesome.
So the community, that small community still there, even though there's, I mean, there's social media, but the world is still, it kind of made the world small again. But like the punk rock community is always so nice. Like I never feel weird about reaching out in this community. I couldn't reach out to like a country music artist. They would never or any of these big rock bands, you
Yeah.
know. But punk
Yeah,
rock
dude.
guys,
I wanted to say,
always.
before we strayed from the topic of what you were saying, Tim, about how everything was kind of like scattered. There was all these different things. And I don't whatever, we don't need to get too into it, but I know everyone has a different like definition of punk rock. Like it's this, it's that, it's the other thing. I mean, generally for me, I think it's more of just an attitude. And I think it's about being a good person and helping people. But I always very much like romanticized that early New York City scene where it was just fucking weirdos. It wasn't a look particular. I mean, you like the Talking Heads were part of it. Blondie was part of it. The Ramones, the
They
Dead
might be
Boys, like,
giants.
yeah, you know what I mean. And I think that we kind of,
My
in a
favorite
way,
band.
maybe didn't know, but we were sort of experiencing a bit of a second wave of that, much further apart geographically. But it's funny that I never put that together until you said it. The thing that I sort of romanticized my whole childhood was what we had. It was just with different bands spread out across multiple states and stuff like that. So it's so cool how even talking about music, not just drums necessarily, can make you realize that the shit you were looking for the whole time, you had it, and you can appreciate it a little bit more. You know what I mean? It's cool.
Well, especially the community thing, I think we can still kind of get online, but to me, musically, what was so special about that era was the fragmentation. Now, because everyone is essentially chronically living online, it has its benefits, but one of the setbacks is that everyone kind of contributes to one music sound. There is a pop music sound, there is a punk rock sound, whatever, a metal or whatever the subgenre you want to get into. Each of these has canonical things that you're going to hear. Still back in the late '90s, early 2000s, San Francisco sounded like San Francisco. If you think about, again, Asian Man Records, you go to Discord. Discord is another band. Everyone in DC, you could tell that's a DC band. You could tell that's a Discord record, release. Even New York to an extent too. Certainly when you get into the subgenres, that was such a special thing to me, is because now, it's almost like thinking about something like a subject like decolonization, but it's sort of in a subcultural way. We lose those regional or sub-regional sounds when everybody's just kind of making the melting pot one. Instead of it being a melting pot with different flavors, it's all the same freaking flavor now, and it's harder to stray from those norms today, which, and what are you going to do? But
I mean, if it makes it feel any better, at least locally, like, so we're right outside of Albany, New York, the capital. And I'm seeing a lot at local shows of like bands that don't sound like each other playing together. So I think people are starting to kind of push back against that and trying to do different things within the scene, which is refreshing. I mean, there's like a thrash band playing with a band that there's this up and coming band in my town, Take Steps, that's kind of I don't. It's just different. It's different than anything heard. I wouldn't necessarily consider it hardcore or punk, but who fucking cares? Like, they're good dudes.
yeah.
They play great music, and they're in the scene, and deal with it. I think that's a part of it too, is the acceptance of it. I think Mike was saying that Flumley in his interview, where like the '90s it was pretty brutal, man. That was a lot of get the fuck off the stage and you're a pussy and you're a sellout and this, that, and the other thing, which I don't know, man. The sellout thing always kind of got me. Especially if you make money playing the music you've always played. How have you sold out? And bands do a commercial. Well, I don't know, man. You did a Taco Bell commercial. Okay, let's crucify them. But what does everyone eat when they're on the road?
Right.
No, I don't know, man. Do your thing.
I agree with it, though. I mean, I'm sure you guys do too with Mike's sentiment. Is it was a little more dangerous to go to shows when I was a kid, and to start to play those shows in the mid 2000s. I was playing in a lot of hardcore bands, metalcore bands, deathcore bands, and those shows. Now I know hardcore, that genre, and some of these metal subgenres continue to have these machismo attitudes. Not all folks, but there are those bad eggs that are in there that continue to be violent. But man, I mean, I think before this is something you mentioned on the Mike episode, was just, I think Matt said, everybody's got a cell phone now. Everybody has a camera. And, mid 2000s, man, that was in some scary scary situations. So I'm glad at least some of that's mellowed out a bit, but it's not to say that it's in all corners of the music world, it's not all daisies and sunshine.
Oh, dude, when I I started going to shows around 13, and my mom made my brother and I fake IDs on the premise that we would only use them to get into shows, right? Which was fucking awesome. And I remember going and there was just dudes like dancing in the pit with Mad Balls. I don't know if you're familiar, which is just
I know the band.
a padlock on a bandana and just like swinging them around, and dudes would tape like razor blades to their boots and stuff. It was nuts. And I think back on it now where I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. It was so exciting. And then you like realize later, I'm like, I could have got murdered. Like it was wild, but so stories that you live to tell, you know what I mean? But yeah, I'm glad it's safer for kids now. And you can go to those shows and feel protected. And there's much more of a sense of community.
And I hope that brings kids out more now. You know, I started playing out when I was 12, and I think I was 13, and you know, the violence got to me too. I was 13. I played a show with some ska band came through from Pennsylvania. Of course, that Hired Geeks band was on the bill, and my band opened the show. At the time, my band's name was Francophone, which means someone who speaks French, which is kind of funny now with me living over here. And I played bass, finished the show. I had a little 115 cab and a head with a bass, and the cab was on wheels. So I'm wheeling everything out the front of the little venue, put my stuff down, went back in to check. I think I missed something or something. And when I came back out, I'm coming down the stairs to walk to my bass rig. And I just remember blacking out, waking up, a 13-year-old kid waking up, kind of held myself in the fetal position. It was because three, you know, at the time, punk skinheads, you know, with that connotation that came along with it, were kicking my face in with steel-toed boots. It had turned out they hit me in the back of the head, a 13-year-old kid. They hit me in the back of the head with brass knuckles, and it was only that my friend pulled out a very sharp object and kind of said, "Get the heck away from my friend." That's the only reason why they stopped, you know. And some of those kids were 18. We didn't press charges or anything. My grandpa picked me up from the show. I'm all bloody. I have, you know, all down my shirt and everything. And my grandpa's an old fisherman who's seen more crazy things in his life than I'll ever see. And he says, you know, what the hell happened to you? And he just gets me in the car and off we went. But, you know, I'm sure once in a while some of these crazy things happen, but I'm really glad that, you know, again, that's what I experienced at 13 years old. I really hope that some of these younger musicians now do experience a higher level of kindness.
Yeah. Oh, dude. I mean, I think that, you know, out of all those horrible things, some good is bound to come of them, right? Like our scene got super violent, and what it led to was all the younger kids fracturing off and doing our own shows and renting out our own VFW halls. And we created a whole nother scene where if you showed up trying to do that, you would be the one on the end of a boot getting kicked out. You know what I mean? And dude, I want to be very clear. I'm not a violent person. I only have to get involved in these things when I absolutely have to. But luckily we had some big dudes that made sure that never happened. But I like that, that vibe of like, we're going to protect our own. And if you're here to cause harm, you're going to be ousted. You're gone. Just go, dude. There's no place for that. And I do think that like there is that weird connection of like, everyone thinks you're crazy, right? Matt, I'm sure you had this too. Like you go to shows, you're slamming in people, you're knocking people over, but a lot of us didn't have contact sports. We didn't have something to take the aggression out. So why is it, you know, it's okay to do if you're padded up on a field, but as soon as you start doing it to music, you're crazy. But I mean, more times than not, the guy that knocks you down is the person that picks you back up.
100%.
But then, you know, people start hearing you can go to shows and you can punch people. And then all the guys that used to beat up in high school are at the shows now doing the same thing. It was pretty brutal.
It's so weird. I feel like I missed out on all that. There was never any violence at any show I ever went to.
Good, dude.
It's like, I don't understand. I mean, I'm glad, but it's just like everyone talks about all these like fights and you know, people, you know, like stuff that happened to you, Tim. And I was like, I never experienced that. I mean, I don't know how many shows I went to, how many shows I played. Like nothing like that ever happened. It's so strange. I always waited for it to happen. It never did.
Good, man. Well, that's what's cool is like everyone had I'm sure that even though Tim and I had those similar experiences, that there's a lot of different ones, and you had a very different one. And Matt, I think that's why you and I work well doing this together, is we both had super different backgrounds, and we have different bands. We have common bands that we like, and I'm sure there's some stuff you like that I don't, and there's some stuff I like that you don't, and
for
fine.
Sure. Yeah.
You're like, I hate 90% of your music, Christian. So sorry, I have my notes over here. I'm not bored, I promise. I guess we'll steer it back towards drumming again.
This is a drumming podcast.
Yeah. So did you have some jobs like outside of music, like leading up to kind of making it more of your main source of or career?
Here's the thing: is I think music has never been my well. There was a small time when it had to be my kind of part of my career, the one big kind of part of my career. But 99% of the time, it's always just been that's the fun thing that I do on top of it. And if it makes a few extra bucks in my life, that's great. Through college, I worked at a local music store that sold primarily used gear. That was really fun because it's almost like you're the bartender to all the punk rock musicians in town.
Yep.
You get to learn, everyone's names, everyone's bands, and it was all walks of life. It wasn't just punk rock. We lived. It was the first big city in Wisconsin. I lived less than a mile from the Illinois border, so in that northern Illinois kind of area, north of Chicago, you had a lot of Central and South American folks. So all the Norteño bands, all the Tejano bands, they would all come up. Those would be guys I'd be helping out with. There were guys who would come and buy, if you remember the old PV power amps that were boat anchors and weighed about 80 pounds a piece, they'd come and buy those because you could drag them behind a truck and they'd still work, and they'd drive them back down to South America for those bands to use for another 20 or 30 years. Everybody in between, all walks of life. So that was really, that's where I kind of cut my teeth learning about gear, a little bit about recording, but primarily learning about drums. I was the drum guy at our store. Any drum set that came through, typically I was the guy who was going to rehead it, fix it up, make it presentable, make it sound good. And I think that's why that's the studio thing primarily has been kind of a focal point of my career, is because I had to make a $100 wine red CB drum set sound like $300 or $400 because no one's going to buy it if it sounds like a bunch of pizza boxes. So you learn a lot that way.
Yeah. So even though not like playing music, you've pretty much been. I mean, I know we've talked a lot, so I know a lot of these answers, but I'm asking for other people. So pretty much like you were still involved in music in one way or another, whether it was selling equipment.
To me, it's always like, so, in college, I didn't really have the time. I tried to play in bands, but I really didn't have the time or the effort to dedicate to that stuff the way I wanted to. So the music store was the way that I kind of kept that in my life. It was a way that I kept in contact with friends, because really outside of school, I mean, even when I was working at the music store, I would get there at sometimes 5 or 6 a.m. before a 10 a.m. shift. And I would just sit there at point of sale with all my homework laid out and slowly be getting through my college homework. They were really kind that they would just let me use the store for my little study corner. After college, it was just that instead of me using work as the music outlet, is that work supported the music outlet. I worked as a business writer. We call it copywriting. I worked in copywriting and technical writing for 5.5 years after college. And it was using the money I made there to build out the little studio I had. All the mics, the little interface stands and everything, the little cameras to make my Instagram videos. And, that took off and became a thing. And all that Instagram stuff is now it's serving me in a different way here in France. But yeah, it's always that the work was the vehicle to financially support me doing the music thing. It was never that the music thing ever financially supported me anything more than that.
Yeah. I mean, that was actually the next thing that I wanted to talk about is like, around when did you start noticing, an uptick in Instagram and YouTube and kind of getting a following on there?
Uh, so I got up to I was one of the first drum guys on Instagram posting videos, and I think that's the reason why I have any. I don't have a lot, but the little bit of notoriety I got is from just being around for so long.
Well,
And
and you're fucking hilarious and you have a great
Yeah,
personality
you're
too.
wacky. I love
Give
it.
yourself some credit, man.
That's
Like,
why I kept coming back.
you're
that's
entertainment for
very
the whole
kind.
family, wholesome. I can watch it with my kids. But anyways, I digress. Just give yourself some credit, buddy.
I was
That's
trying to
very kind.
explain you to someone or my wife or something. I was like, he starts playing and then he just like totally like derails after about 30 seconds and it's just madness and yelling.
Kind of
And
surprised you're not
that's why I
reviewing
keep
any
coming
French
back.
candy.
I'll
I
have to
want
bring back the food reviews, but I think that's a pretty apt summary, Matt. But I stuck right around 10,000 followers till 2020, and it was during the pandemic I think that I really started to see this uptick in people wanting to see more. It was primarily the wacky stuff, the entertainment stuff, but I mean, we were living during a time when there wasn't much to put a smile on your face, and
Hmm.
fortunately, I was putting out a lot of content that just kind of tried to give people 30 seconds to a minute of relief, during some really tough times. And yeah, now I've got just under 50,000 followers. I don't post as much as I, used to. Obviously, I'm trying to figure out how the heck to live in a foreign country right now, which is a heck of a task. But that the reason I don't know if it's the reason. I don't know why I posted videos. I guess the reason was just because it was fun for me, and now it is serving me in these different ways. It's never been that I make all these drum videos, drum covers, silly drum videos, blah blah blah. On YouTube, I have a lot of educational content to learn about vintage drums from the past, drum construction, even some stuff on drum recording and that sort of thing. Um, but it's serving me in this new way. Like, we came to France and I went to a meetup for English speaking people in this town that's like 2 hours south of Paris. I would kind of compare it to like the Milwaukee of France. It's a mid-sized city, post-industrial, super artsy fartsy now, lots of artists, lots of musicians. And so I go to this English speaking, like corporate people meetup thing, and wasn't a lot of people I really wanted to talk to at that kind of event, but I met a gal there who, we talked a little bit, and I said I'd do this, that, and the other in the corporate world, marketing stuff, but I'm a drummer. So my husband's a drummer. You really, you guys should connect. And I gave her my Instagram, and I got a text from her that night. She's like, "Oh my God, my husband has watched all your videos on YouTube, and he loves all your stuff." And this is a French guy who's lived in France his whole life, and somehow he found my little YouTube thing and had been watching it. And we wound up. My wife has bad migraines, and we've been, we needed to find a doctor to help get this really special medication that's hard to get. And so we got a referral, but it was going to take 6 months to get in with this one doctor. And so this drummer, who is a doctor, who was the husband of this gal, said, "Well, I know the one doctor who prescribes that special migraine drug, and one in this region. I'll give her a call." We got it in 2 weeks. My wife's got the medication, no freaking problem, because of me posting stuff. So to get back to this whole punk rock culture thing, it's like, there it is. There's two guys now. I might be a punk rock drummer. He's more of a funk drummer, but that's about the most punk rock thing right there to say is, well, we create a friendship based on this drum stuff. And because he has access to these certain people, now through the power of community, we're able to help my wife have, she might have a headache for me once in a while, but now her migraines ain't going to be popping up as often. So I'd say that's a win.
Wow, that's a really cool story. Wow.
So
You never know.
Drums pay off in a different way now. It's crazy,
Yeah, dude.
crazy.
So, well, crazy is a good way to go into this. So it's funny, man, is you're kind of like queuing up my questions for me so far. Like everything's going in the order I have it written down. So now that you told us some good experiences, and that have you had any like crazy followers or like some weird shit go down?
Certainly, yeah. No, I mean, you get some kooky people. For a long time, when I was posting more regularly, I'd have to block, I'd say 3 to 5 people a week. just people making real mean comments or whatever. But the way I kind of looked at it is it's like, pruning a plant or something, just making sure that the good bits stick and the bad bits are gone. And I didn't pay much mind to the comments for a long time. I would screenshot them just because I thought it was silly, and I'd usually send one or two to my closest friends once in a while. I'd say, "Look at this freaking idiot" or whatever. But it's you have to grow thick skin, and I certainly think the punk rock scene of the early 2000s did that with some of those, like that experience I mentioned earlier, some other experiences I had, and working at the music shop was another one. You're working with a bunch of musicians and no one wants to work as it is, so people are going to not necessarily bring their best attitudes all the time. And
Yep.
so that's how that goes. But the good always in the community, I think the good always outweighs the bad by tenfold. You look at this example I gave of this guy in France on a chance encounter, and there's plenty of other drummers that I've met here, a handful of other drummers that I've met here who have been really, 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 really kind. Simply because there's that. I think they call it parasocial relationships, but the way I kind of look at it is, when people have that basis of watching some of my videos, whether it's the YouTube stuff or the Instagram stuff, or listening to some of the podcasts I've been on, it kind of acts like a resume on a personal level of who this guy is. And hopefully they don't judge me on the videos where I'm wearing a Shrek mask and playing death metal drumming. But, if they judge me on some of this stuff where I'm being more of a real human, I think they get an idea where it's okay, I can trust this guy a little more than if he was just some other, American Joe Schmo, walking down the streets of a little French city.
Right. Well, that's what I've always appreciated about you too. Getting to know you outside of that is you don't feel that need to be on all the time and be like, you know what I mean? Like you Tim and then Timbo, it's it's different, and you have to have this energy, but it's not like you're on here. I haven't seen you deep throat your microphone yet or anything. So
I probably blow a vein in my neck if I was on 100% all the time. But that's really the difference. I think, well, this is something I struggle with now is it's like we live in about a 440 square foot apartment now. All my drums, all my cymbals, all my recording gear, any musical equipment at all that I own, minus I have a tambourine somewhere and I got a drum pad. That's all I got here. It's all in England, and we're going to bring it over in August. But having lived without any musical equipment now for 7-ish months, actually 8, if you count the 1 month that we were in between Wisconsin and France, having basically, you could say we're coming up on a year of having no freaking musical equipment at all in the house. And it's that combined with existing in a new country really changes your perspective. I'll say it's changed my perspective on who I am and everything, because simply moving from one continent to another, the way I've kind of talked about this with a few friends on the phone is it's like, imagine getting dropped into the world, born today, but instead of having that 18 years where you get to learn the language, learn the systems, build your friendships, build your skills, you have to do all of those things from day one. You have all the responsibilities of an adult from day one. And this experience has completely changed my outlook on what I want to do with my life, because I'm literally having to reinvent myself. And I've been really wrestling with the idea of if I'm done with drums and music for good. And it's not like, I'm sure the listeners and you guys probably know 1,000 frickin' drummers who come to you once or twice a month and say, I'm freaking done. I'm selling my gear, dude. I'm like, we all know that guy, those few guys in our lives. I've got a few of them too, and God freaking bless them for blowing up my phone once a month. But this isn't that kind of an experience. I am so grateful for everything that music has given me. It gave me community and friends as a kid when that was something that was harder to come by. It gave me and my brother, who are two vastly different people, it gave us something to go and do together for many years. Going to see, he loved the Bouncing Souls and Against Me, which are a couple bands that I'd showed him when we were kids. And Alkaline Trio. I think we saw Alkaline Trio together, and my cousin, who was his age, my brother's age too. We saw Alkaline Trio together 8 or 9 times. We saw Against Me 4 or 5 times. We saw Bouncing Souls 8 or 9 times together. That was a vehicle for us to connect as a family. Drums have given me incredible accolades and incredible friends. I wouldn't be on this podcast today without drums. I can count some of my heroes as friends and acquaintances now. My wife got her freaking migraine drugs because I play drums. Yeah. But, I'm at a point now where it's like, I've got health problems. It's one of the big reasons we moved to France. It cut already without insurance here. It's cut my healthcare costs from $15,000 a year back in the States to about, I don't know, $1,000 a year here tops without insurance. That's going to go down 70% once I've got insurance, which is incredible. It's even lower than I thought it would be. But yeah, I don't know, man. I guess it's just, you get to a place where I'm always going to be a drummer, whether I have drums in the house or not. I'm always going to be punk rock. That's just built into my freaking blood. But I've got 20 years left, 25 years tops. That's tops before my heart explodes from the drugs that keep me alive. I got a lot more other things I want to do with my time here. I've played on music that's won Grammys. I've made all those friends. I have nothing else to prove to anyone with this instrument. And I'm so thankful for what the instrument's given me, but I'm really fighting with this thing now of, I don't know, I want to just freaking hang out and have friends and see parts of the world that I've never seen before and live a little peaceful life with, person I love more than anybody else. It's just a different perspective, I guess.
Fuck yeah, dude. That was awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that with us. I've always admired that about you too, of being able to kind of open up and, tell people the truth about how you feel about things,
Well, you can't, I don't know. Lying ain't doing nothing for nobody unless it's my grandpa telling a good fish story. So I try to tell the truth.
It's really cool seeing this side of you. I don't know this side of you. You and Christian have talked, but you and I have not talked like this. And so I know you as, this zany guy who plays Phil Collins drum fills over every song and then screams into a mic. And so it's cool that I'm hearing this side of you. It's really, really neat, interesting. And thank you for opening up to us like that. I mean, man, you're gonna make me cry.
Well, I mean, I know Christian's got kids. Matt, do you have kids? I think you're married, right, Matt?
Yeah, I'm married and have an 8-year-old daughter. Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, it's like, I'm sure it was when both you guys met your wives, I would hope that they were the type of, people that you think, oh, I'm never going to find anything better than this. This is the most amazing relationship I've had in the world. Your best friend, you're everything.
Yeah, I can't find anyone better than my wife. There's like nobody.
Dude, trust. I mean, trust is such a huge thing. My wife and I did long distance, about 4 hours for the first year and a half we were together. And I never once was like, what's she doing right now? Who's she with? Blah, 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 blah. I just when we weren't together, I trusted her, and I'd never had that with anyone before. So that was yeah, you're right.
But that trust, to me, the trust extends, so far beyond that. To me, the trust, for me, it extends to having the same radical communication that I'm trying to have with you guys around my feelings with the drum set is the same kind of radical communication I bring to my wife on a whole slew of topics, whether it's my past, my childhood, any of the tough shit that I've been through. It changes everything. And I think it's through this, I think, is a totally punk rock thing, is to simply to radically communicate with the people you care about, whether it's your friends or your spouse or anybody else. I had, I've, as I've been going through this, I'm leaning on some of my best friends for that. Go back to Mike Palumley. He brought up that yellow kit. Matt, you brought up that yellow kit on the podcast. That was the premiere.
Yes.
One of my closest friends in this world, John Perrin, he's literally in Europe on the road with JD McPherson right now. He owns that kit. It's sitting in his parents' house in Elgin, Illinois right now.
Oh, wow.
So,
dude, I love JD.
I've worked on those Premier drums before. I've tuned them up, and I think we had to replace some lugs and stuff. So I know that kit inside and out.
Quite literally.
But going through this time right now, John's been a guy that I've been calling, and I'm just like, man, what am I supposed to do here? What does this look like? And excuse me, in the same way, I've been there for John through some really tough times of his. And I think it's because, again, it's a freaking punk rock thing to be that radically open and to radically communicate with the people that you care about. Think about, if you think about the other kinds of people that live in this world, the people that I think try to color within the lines a little bit more than we tend to, except for Christian, because that's his whole freaking job. So he better, do that between the lines. Yeah, unless it's abstract tattooing, maybe that's a little different. But but the folks who live that way, I think, when you abide by some of these norms, I think about when you were kids. I don't know about you guys. We didn't have any freaking money when I was a kid, so I'd have to get everything was on clearance. I got orange Dickies shorts because they were $3 on Hot Topic clearance. I got a shirt that had a squirrel on it that said, I talk to squirrels, chicoo, chicoo, chicoo. I got that shirt from Hot Topic because it was $1.80. I'm not kidding you. Their online clearance was just incredibly inexpensive, and that's the only reason I could wear them clothes. But because I had these wacky orange shorts, these wacky T-shirts, I had hair down. I looked like a freaking sheepdog. Now I don't have any hair, so I'm glad I had it then.
All three of us did.
Yeah.
But it's, you dress that way. Oh man, you dress that way and you look that way as a kid, and a lot of more, kind of straight and narrow folks who they don't get it. And in the same way, I think a lot of those folks, not all of them, but there are a lot of folks that fall into this camp, punk rock or not though, but less in punk rock world, that kind of feel that it's not necessary to think in these same ways or to communicate in these same ways. And I'd like to think, well, I don't know if I'd like to think, I wish it wasn't this way, but I think that that's to the detriment of folks' lives and their relationships. And it's something I learned from punk rock, is that radical openness, radical communication. It's something I hold close to me today because it's transformed my life in a way that is something I think is a good thing. I don't know. Yeah. What do you guys think?
For sure. I will be honest with you. I'm very much looking forward to watching this back because for most of that, it froze. So I didn't hear a lot of what you said. So it's nice for like our own podcast. Now I get like little Easter eggs. So,
I don't know why it keeps doing that.
I don't know, but I was talking about my wife, and then you said, no, totally, but it's more than that. So hopefully you just didn't say anything that made me look like a dickhead about my wife. What a piece of shit, Christian.
Oh, no.
Great, man.
I don't know. You seem to be the only one having the issue, so I don't know if it's me or if it's on your end. So I
no, I'm blaming you. It's you. It's definitely you. It's always you.
My wife and I spent so much time because we just rebuilt our studio that I'm in, and we did everything we could to make sure the internet was nice and strong out here. So I don't know. It could be me. I don't know. But nobody's home. Everyone's gone. So no one's streaming anything. No one's on any devices. I turned my Wi-Fi off on my phone. So I've got a strong Wi-Fi signal. So
wow. Either way, man,
But
we're good.
hey, sorry, Christian, but yeah, if you cut out,
To
the
apologize.
audio's still going, so it's
Okay.
okay. No,
Yeah, I've
nobody,
learned to
no,
keep
nobody
quiet.
watches the video. um, I wanted to ask you. I was always interested in your drums. Always sound so good, and I'm interested in drum recording and miking placement and stuff like that. And you know, I like watching your videos because they're fun, but I'm also interested in how you get them to sound so good. What do you use? What interface do you use? What I noticed you use some 57s up in your concert toms sometimes, and it always sounds so
Gentlemen,
good.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Since you and I have talked about this a bit, I'm gonna just excuse myself, use the restroom real quick, and I'll come right back.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
for
yeah.
Okay,
it.
cool.
Go
I
for
just
a
wanted
peep
to
beat.
I wanted to say it before I walked away. I'll be right back.
So I use all sorts of stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, I, at home I was running two UA Apollo X8Ps Gen ones, and I was running generally Neve 1073 style pre's on them with a little bit of EQ, and that would run into Logic. And in Logic, I use a lot of. I'm like a dad with plugins. I still go to Waves.
Hmm.
Um, I invested in Waves in the Mercury bundle back, like, must have been, I don't know, 2016 maybe. Spent a couple grand on that, and even though you have to pay for update plan every year, it's like $100 every year. You got access to just about anything you could want sound wise under the
Right.
sun. Um, so that's kind of my approach. And what's nice is, so I originally started recording with a Tascam. It's called like a US 1800 or something. It's 8 mic ins with a couple lines, and they make a new version now. It's like the 16X08 or something. But as silly as it is, I really loved the sound of the preamps on that thing.
Hmm.
And it sounded great. Some of in my opinion, some of the coolest recordings I've worked on were done with that thing. Like a multi-million-dollar Disney show with my drums going. At the Japanese theme park. That was recorded on a $299 interface that I bought for $150 used. Um,
I mean,
and it sounded great.
that goes to show that it's, a lot of it's the performer and how you tune your drums and how you hit your drums. You know, you can get a
It's the
signal.
source.
Yeah, you can get a signal all day and whoever mixes it can make it sound real great, but if it's a good signal with bad drumming or bad, old heads or whatever, or just crappy cymbals or whatever, it's not going to sound good. You can't really do much with that. So you being the performer, playing so solid and knowing what you're doing with something that's not that expensive as far as like a interface, it's going to sound good.
That's what it is, and it's not. You don't have to spend money on any of the. I think the only thing you really have to spend money on is cymbals, and
Yeah.
then you can, if you find the right brand, alloy wise, B20 is B20 is B20, and there are so many Turkish and Chinese factories that are making wonderful sounding cymbals now that you can find a set of cymbals for like $1,200, a couple
Mhm.
crashes of riding hats, and they sound killer, no problem. So uh anyway, so yeah, the way that I kind of look at it is it all comes back to the source. The difference between, midway between the freaking like $5,000 interfaces and the $150 interface was the Behringer XR18, which has 16 mic ins plus 2 line ins.
Mhm.
I like that just because of the amount of sounds I can capture at a time. 10 was fine, but 18 was better.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I generally tend to play a 4-piece kit. And the way that I approach miking is the following. So on kick, I would have 2 mics in and out, but my kick in mic was almost out of the porthole on the drum every time because I'm trying to capture a balanced tone.
Mhm.
I want to be able to use either mic independently or both of them together in different ways to capture whatever tone I want to get out of that. Same
Mhm.
thing with snare. 2 different top mics, usually a condenser and a dynamic mic, like a 57, and then I had an NT55 with a cardioid capsule, which is essentially just an NT5 on top, 57 on bottom, and same thing. I want to use either top mic or I can use them both, and whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to capture the sound, some sort of cool sound out of that. Toms are toms. As long as I get low end out of them, I'm happy. So MD421s on toms, AKG 414s. I don't remember which version. It's the last version with the physical switches for overheads. Just cardioid on those. And then, this goes back to what you messaged me about years ago, Matt, was room mics. This was bread and butter to me making money playing drums, is room mics. You can capture a drum set under all the mics minus the room, but that's not what you hear in your head when you're playing with your band live or in the practice room. You're hearing drums in a room. You need to capture that room somehow. Now, you can do that with something as cheap as a SM57 copy. Within the last few years, one of the ones that I've really liked is Pile Audio makes a SM57 copy that you can get on Amazon for literally 15 or 20 bucks with a cable. Yes.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I think the downside of those is you can smack a 57 accidentally with a stick and have it keep working. I had one of those piles. I hit it one time and it blew apart. So the durability, I think, is what you're paying for the 57s.
I might have to look into that because I'm really careful with everything. So
the thing I like about the piles is I'm almost certain, basically for a long time in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, there were these fake SM57s out there. The only way you could tell they were fake is you'd have to open them up and the lead wires to the element were a different color. And I'm pretty sure Pyle found that person who I'm certainly got a cease and desist and said, let's just change things a little bit, but let's keep the rest of it the same and we're going to put our name on it. So that's the reason why you can get this. You do not need to spend money on this stuff, a ton of money.
So it's like the same capsule, basically, right?
Yeah. Essentially, it's not enough of a difference to warrant a $100, increase in price. So, all you have to do with a room mic is just kind of find a place where you're capturing a sound different than the kit. You're trying to capture ambience, not transients. Transients are the hits. You're already capturing that with close microphones. Ambience is the room. That's what you need to add to the sound. So I personally use cheap ribbon mics. MXL makes some cheap ribbon mics. SE Electronics makes some cheap ribbon mics. I like to use MXL's European brand just because basically it looks nicer. I think it's Apex, but the model is 210B, 210B. And you can buy this thing for $150 freaking dollars, and it sounds awesome. Yeah, they're a little MXL right there. Christian's got one of these MXLs hanging around. And the benefit of a ribbon mic is that it rolls off some of the top end, and it's going to capture a lot of the mid frequencies. That's really what you're trying to capture from that room, and essentially amplify that sound, EQ it a little bit, but amplify these qualities through compression. And compression is going to change the character of this. The position of the room mic is going to change the character as well. And then, basically you add that to your drum bus, process all of your drum stuff together. You have eight or 14 mics, whatever your setup entails. You're going to take each of those signals. You have 14 or whatever microphone signals, and you're going to smush them into one stereo signal. You're going to take all your different drums and turn them into one unified drum set sound. Drum bus processing, I always just recommend a little bit of EQ, maybe a high pass filter to get rid of some nasty low end, and then a compressor on the butt end of that signal chain to add more flavor. I try to think, compression, obviously it has some utilitarian use, but to me, it's like the spice that you're adding to this whole thing is, it's the flavor. So this is the punk rock culture part of it, is don't have to spend a lot on mics. You can just buy this, these cheap $20 mics. You don't have to spend a lot on an interface. You can spend 150 or 200 bucks on a used interface. You can, there are ways to get software for free if you know what you're doing.
Reaper,
Reaper's a great
That's what I
option,
use.
and with plugins, you could, with Reaper especially, you can just Google best free VST drum compressors,
I did
and
pay
now
the
you have.
$60, just so everyone knows.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
Yes.
One of the few, and you can get all this stuff for next to nothing and start to record your band. And in my opinion, it's so much more punk rock because then what you can do is, instead of investing, you know, let's say, instead of investing $1,000 to $1,500 and going into a studio for 2 or 3 days, now for that same price, you have the equipment to do it all on your own, and you'll be able to do a whole record. And now you'll be able to do any record you want for the foreseeable future for free.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just learning a few new skills. You can share these skills with your friends. I share this stuff all the time. The same way that you message me, Matt, I get so many messages about that kind of thing, and I am always apt to share. I'm not into gatekeeping.
Yeah.
If you could try to, what is I saw a video you doing a playthrough of, is it Fire Sale? Is that the name of the band? And it's like, if you could try to replicate my sound on a Fire Sale, drum through playthrough video or whatever, but you don't have my drums, you don't tune the way I tune, you don't hit the way I hit, you don't have the same ear that I have for kind of shaping these sounds. So at the end of the day, even if I told you everything I knew and I asked you to replicate everything the way that I do it, I'm still going to sound like me, and you're still going to sound like you.
Yep.
So that's my 2 cents on all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes. That's what it goes back to when I was saying, it's the way the drummer plays and hits and tunes. We're all different, and that's what it's going to sound like. When you record someone, it's going to sound like that. You can't replicate someone.
No.
Well, I had reached out to you more recently than not about heads, and you told me about the Evans Onyx, and I put them on tops and bottoms.
Love them.
Yeah, and then when I picked up an old 80s rocker kit from some guy out of like a barn for $120, and it had the original Remo like silver dots on it from the 80s. I took it apart, I cleaned it, and essentially they're classic maples, like the ones before they started spray painting the insides. But I have a 12 by 11, a 13 by 12. I have these cannons, but they're still the classics, right? And the Evans, I threw them on there, and they sounded great. And the only thing I did recently was I put the silver dots back on the top and left the Evans on the bottom to kind of like take away some of that. So to your point, like, even if you're not doing things the exact same way, and if you did copy everything, a little bit of those trial and error things are nice. But when you have friends that you can rely on to give you advice of what to try, you don't waste as much money on just, I mean, dude, heads now, especially, it's absolutely nuts. Like, so,
it's really, I mean, this is the thing. I think this is what's so hard about being a drummer today. And I think this is why being a punk rock drummer, at least culturally, in the way that you radically share things and skills or resources or whatever, is so important. The drum set is the most freaking expensive instrument to play, if you're in a band. I think Mike Falumley said he's breaking crashes every 8 or 9 shows. That's, there goes $200 to $400 a pop every time one of those breaks. The way that I look at this is like, if we don't share these little hacks and everything, then the whole ship is going to go down. This instrument is, as it sits, this instrument is like a century old. I don't know how long it's going to survive now, because more of us, like me, are living in apartments. We don't have a place to play because it's really expensive to find a place to play drums. Not only that, but just having using the instrument is expensive. Drumsticks are over here. Drumsticks are about $20 US a pair at a store. These were 18 euros. I think at the exchange rate, it's like $19 or something like that.
Mm.
This is it's very hard to do this financially. So I just hope that anything we can do, and it's an old instrument, so eventually it's going to age out anyways. But anything we can do to try to help people to continue using this instrument, to continue to show people that the instrument has value. Primarily
Right.
other instrumentalists like guitarists who only want to use Superior Drummer to program the drums. Now, if we can show those people, hey, actually, we have value as drummers too, then maybe we'll get another fingers crossed, another century out of the frickin'
Well, that's
drums.
what
I
I'm
don't
trying
know.
to do. I mean, between the, the Facebook group I started and the podcast, and I built my studio as a drummer's studio, because I know guitarists and vocalists, they can do everything at home, but recording real drums is, you got to find the space, you got to have all the mics, you got to have so I built my studio for, you know, well, I'm a drummer, and so I understand. So that's why I built it. So people, drummers can come and record there, and they don't have to rely on all that stuff. So I'm trying to keep that alive as well here at my home, and it's cool. I think people are just. I think it's people think it's cool that there is a place dedicated for like real drums, you know, and I've never tried to program drums. Is it hard? Have you ever done that?
It's not too bad. It's not too hard. I
Okay.
think it's just then everything sounds the same. When this technology first came out, I was playing a lot of metalcore, and
Hmm.
I remember after the Burial released their first record before Rare Form, they had a different record with a different vocalist, and it was one of the first ones in our kind of Midwest metal scene that used, before Superior Drummer, they had a program called Drum Kit from Hell. And it was like one drum kit with one set of cymbals. So everybody started using it because it sounded good, but all those recordings, all the drums sounded the same. So it was indiscernible, and so it kind of took away from the flavor of everything. Superior Drummer does the same in some ways. It makes some things easier. If you only have an apartment to play in, you can use an electronic drum set,
Hmm.
use MIDI to go right into your interface, and now from an apartment, you can get a really great sounding drum sound. So I don't want to discount that. I think that's really, really cool. But there are other ways to do this, like what you're doing, Matt. There's a great engineer here in Nantes, France. His name's Chris Ogoma. And this dude has the facility to make a really modern, beautiful sounding recording that rivals the really massive punching transients of things like Superior Drummer and sampling, but he's using the natural sound of the drums from the drummer that he's recording. He's using the natural room sound that comes off of a real drum set. That's what, in my opinion, that's what separates a good recording from a really great recording, because you
Right.
retain your sound even if the again, level of compression, level of transient shaping is uh as heavy as all the other modern recordings that you hear out there.
Right. Oh.
I think that's what. Sorry, I muted my channel because I was coughing there. I mean, I think that's what you're right. Is there's an element of it that's getting lost. I mean, you listen back to all those old recordings, and like you could definitely identify a drummer by like the style that they're playing, but also like Bill Stevenson sounded like Bill Stevenson. Like all the drums sounded, and you're right. Like a certain bit of that is getting lost right now. And the difference is too is like I grew up listening to like a lot of like Extreme Noise Terror and like Nausea and even like the early Napalm Death stuff, and I still enjoy that music, but my ears can't hear it anymore. Like there's a lot of that like trebly high end that just it doesn't register, so it makes me fucking really sad. Is like I listen to it now and I don't hear anything anymore. And then sort of the modern version of that is now everything is so processed that I hear it, but I'm not excited anymore. Like there's no like,
Yeah.
ooh, that snare drum is like, dude, everything's a big fat snare drum now. Like I want Snapcase back. I want a piccolo tune so tight that it's going to blow out if you hit it one more time and then have the next, but you know what I mean? Like you're right. Like there is a human element that's getting lost. So for a company to make a product that you can swap out drums for if you have to play digitally. Because you're right, that's an amazing tool to be able to have. And I think there is a time and a place for everything. Like I have an EAD 10 hooked up, and I blend that in with everything else. And I've been making some music with my oldest daughter, and she likes a lot of the stuff I like. She likes some different stuff. So occasionally, if it's a rock song, like I'll throw an 808 in there throughout a part, and I'll throw some overdrive on it and kind of make that like dissident background lower sounds. So yeah, sorry, I don't really know what the point of me saying this was, but other than reiterating reiterating that you're right.
Every tool has its place.
Yeah.
Superior Drummer's got its place. The EAD has its place, particularly in social media world. But I think, again, as just someone who's been playing music for decades, I appreciate someone who brings the skills and the tools to the table, and the time and the effort to go the extra mile to really paint a more unique picture with what they have. That's all.
For sure. I agree with you. Yeah.
Well, that's like, you can definitely hear that in a lot of like the old, like that older punk rock is like, there's bands that you could tell, like we're just kind of thrashing along. And then there's bands that like, I'm trying to think of like how to explain it. Like a lot of what set that early, the early like thrashier punk stuff to me apart was like, you take like Roy Mayorga from Nausea, like it was those thrashy, really punk, but that dude, like, I mean, he's been in like Ministry and like done stuff with like the dudes from Sepultura and stuff like that. I mean, the guy's got a huge resume, by the way. If anyone knows him, please put him in contact with us. But like those recordings, those earlier Nausea recordings, they weren't great quality recordings, but you could tell Roy, he could play. And like, that's a big part of it too, is I think that's what makes so many bands stand out, whether people want to admit it or realize it or not, that a lot of the bands that you picked that stood out, maybe you like the vocal, maybe you like this, but a lot of it is the drums. And
think about this. Here's a great example in one band. Think about some of the formative records of Against Me, reinventing Axl Rose era stuff. That dude his name was Warren Oakes.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my brother loved going and seeing Against Me during that era, because this dude would sit behind his drum. He had a 4-piece kit with hats and a ride. That was it. And the guy would just sit behind the kit, and he'd just be cheesing with the biggest smile on you ever saw. And he was having so much great to watch. And to me, with the recordings that he did with that band, he was like a punk rock Charlie Watts of the Rolling Stones. And by that, I mean that Warren would approach these records from a perspective, having the facility he had, which, this guy is not a Vinnie Caliuta. This is a guy who just plays some drum beats, but it was like the missing puzzle piece that made those records sound so good. He was on Searching for a Former Clarity too, which was really one of their big crossover records for that band.
Also the first one where he put on his snare wires.
Yes, yeah. Again, it's another silly element that in my head, it's like, it's silly. Why aren't there snares on the snare drum? But it adds this whole freaking character to everything that he did with that band. Afterwards, the first record they did after that actually featured, I can't remember his name, I got to look, George Rebello from Hot Water Music and The Draft and now Bouncing Souls.
Yeah.
Totally different. And the only freaking thing they changed was the drummer.
Yeah.
And I think it set that band on a course for, what they were. And now, what the solo act is now today is, just kind of the drummer changed it all. Changed
Same
the
thing happened with Green Day.
formula of the band.
Look at Green Day.
Yeah.
Their first drummer was left-handed and sloppy. And then they get Trey, and all of a sudden now they're,
It's also the name of your sex tape.
Oh no.
Left-handed and sloppy.
Dude, I held so many of those back during the Dave Ron interview. I had to get one out now. I apologize.
But yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example.
No, 100%. 100%. So
I mean, I think I've said that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, Chris, go ahead.
So many times on it, like even just saying like, you take a Snapcase snare drum and put on a Zeppelin record, and you put a Zeppelin snare drum, put on a Snapcase record. It's just different. And I think a part of, I know a part of why I wanted to do this, because I don't think we get enough credit, and it's not an ego thing. It's just giving some, maybe other people will start to realize how important the drums are to the sound of something, where even changing the snare drum. I was watching Last Man on Earth last night with my oldest daughter, and it was an episode where they kept playing that Fine Young Cannibals Drives Me Crazy. And like that's like an iconic snare drum sound. You know what I mean? If you put a big fat snare drum in that place, that's not that song. The vibe is totally fucking different. So give us some goddamn credit, everyone.
Think about, and it's sad. It doesn't just extend to the credit of the sound of the band, but it extends to the way that I think professional drummers are treated too. Think about what happened to Stinky from NoFX. What I heard is after that band stopped Smelly.
I'm calling him Stinky from now on.
I love that.
Stinky. No, but when Eric, I think is his real name, right? Eric. When that guy stopped playing in the band, I heard from a friend of mine who heard it on a podcast, it sounds like the dude is literally having to drive Uber or Uber Eats or something now once in a while to help make ends meet. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I don't think so. No,
you don't think so?
No. My cousin is good friends with him and just spent time with him. No, he's good. He's fine.
Is he taking care? Well, okay. Well, there's other examples.
Now.
Think about Dave. Oh, that's okay. He's living a good life.
Yeah.
But think about Dave Lombardo. It's like, think about the disparity between what he was making in Slayer versus some of these other guys, and it's a reason why he left. And some of these big band, not some, but I would say a lot of big bands, drummers are the ones who have to struggle to try to make the buck. It's not fair. I know some younger guys who, when other people in the band were making six figures, they were struggling to get, the same salary as a guy who's, working as a warehouse, full-time warehouse guy just to play drums. Yeah. And they're playing on big stages with big gear across the world. And the guy can't even, is fighting to make a living wage playing drums.
That was something I was probably most surprised about, because when you're younger, you think, oh, they have this album out, everyone likes them, that they're just like filthy rich. And then as I got more into the scene and started meeting people and started working with, some of these people, like they have a medical issue and they can't pay for it. I'm like, what? Wait, hold on. Like, you're like this to me, how are you? But they really didn't make money, when I thought they were, and that was such a huge surprise to me. And not just drummers, I'm just saying, just some of my heroes. You kind of have this thought that they're, larger than life and filthy rich, and they're not,
No, I know some of the most well-renowned drummers I know have reverse mortgages on their home to try to stay afloat.
Yeah, nuts.
It is really tough. But to me, then I try to take those as lessons for my own life, and to try to provide that sort of insight to friends who are doing this sort of work too. It's the reason why I've had a day job. It's the reason why I try to use my degree to stay afloat instead of playing drums. It's the reason why, when I have friends who call me who are touring, who are really going through it and don't want to do it anymore, I try to, when it's appropriate, I certainly try to say, there's accessible education out there to try to build the life you want to live. And it doesn't mean that you have to stop playing drums. It doesn't mean that you're not a drummer. It doesn't negate the fact that you toured. It's the same way I kind of think about my life now. Even if I don't have a drum set, even if I don't touch a drum set more than once every few years, I'm still a drummer. Mm-hmm. It doesn't negate any of the accolades I've had or any of the cool stuff I've done, period. We live in a time when it's hard enough to stay afloat financially if you have a day job, whether you live in Texas, New York, or France. And that's only further more difficult if you try to play drums full time. The number of guys I know who have been salaried doing this work, I can count on one hand.
Right.
And the number of those folks who are still salaried are even fewer now today. It's no, it's tough, and so I think there's a lot of guys, whether they're playing punk rock music or not, they feel like if to be a drummer, to feel like a drummer, I have to do this full time. I have to be touring. I have to be a rock star. Whatever the heck they have in their head, and that's not true, man.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I don't think any of that is true, and it doesn't take away from your skill or
Right.
your worth as a musician or any of these things. And I think it's why, whether it's with my students or any of the drummer friends I have in my life, I always try to just hammer home to everyone that, like, we all started playing this instrument because it was freaking fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to try to continue to recenter that love for fun over anything else, because otherwise it's just, man, that relationship with the instrument, the relationship with the music can go sour. It can go toxic so fast, whether you're playing in bands or whether you're doing social media or anything in between.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes I think it's not always just for fun. I think, like, in my case, I had to. I couldn't help it. I was hitting everything.
There was no choice. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, my parents were getting irritated with me, and they bought me a drum set. They're like, "Well, if you're gonna hit everything, hit this," you know. And so, like, there's this drive, like this kind of natural drive we have too. It is fun, of course, like what you said, but I think we can't help it too.
it's built.
I don't know what it is.
I think it's built into a lot of guys. I'm sure us three, it was certainly built in from the get go to do what we do.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up. My older brother, who's only 18 months older than me, like phenomenal stringed instrument player, bass, guitar. I mean, now banjo, ukulele, man, like literally anything. So I just kind of started playing drums because that's all that was left, and there needed to be a drummer. So, and then I tried all those other instruments and failed miserably at it, and that was the one that I picked up, and I was like, this clicks. And now I have this lifelong bond with my brother that Matt has with his cousins, and I'm sure you have with people, where there's those guys or girls that you can play with, and you can play through a song without hearing it, because you know what they're going to do. You know that the same head nod, for some reason it means slow down. For some reason it means
call it
pause.
the science.
But, like, you know what I mean?
The science, dude.
The science. That's what my band always called it. The science. We'd always go, okay, let's do what Descendants do. They don't do stick counts. Bill looks at Stefan, and Stefan's doing this, and then then Bill raises his sticks and they go into the song. That's what we always try to do. It was called the science.
It's cool.
It's great, yeah, to have that, man. We are coming up on about an hour and a half right now. You got some time, Tim, or you kind of you got stuff going on?
No, I got time. What do you got?
Well, I did want to bring up, I know that we kind of strayed in coming back to it, but as far as the Instagram stuff going, I think that there's probably one thing that made you stand out above everyone else. You want to know what it was?
What was that?
I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Tell us a little bit about that, dude. Like, that drum fill just fucking blew up, man. It was so funny that was the thing. Like,
I don't know what that was. I don't know why that was a big thing that worked. The first time I started doing it was I was on Craigslist, and I found the biggest pearl fiberglass kit I've ever owned in my life. It was all white wrap. You could tell it'd been smoked on for 40 years. The guy was super nice. I bought it off a guy who was moving to, like, Alabama or Georgia to basically run a sanctuary for wolf dogs and wolves that had previously been pets. Totally wild shift in life, which was cool. But so I got this kit.
So it could have been wolf pee instead of smoke. That was
dude. That would just add to the mojo. I would never wash it off. Dude, that's like alpha energy, dude. But like, it was, dude, all concert times, 224s, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 16. And then I think it was 16 and 18 floor toms, something like that. And somehow I got all of that with hardware and cymbals into a Honda Fit and got that home. I don't remember how the heck I accomplished that. I should get an Olympic gold medal for that. But I did that, and I made the first Phil video where I did the Phil Collins thing. I made videos playing some Kiss songs, playing some Alex Van Halen stuff, and silly videos. And people really received the Phil Collins stuff well. Zildjian reposted some of it on Instagram at the time.
That kit?
And then
Is that the kit?
So that's actually, that kit came after. So that was the second kit where everything started to happen. So I know Scott Jenkins from Jenkins Martin Drums, and we knew each other through the Chicago drum show scene. Scott's a super, super, super nice guy. And he said, listen, dude, I've got this huge concert tom kit hanging around the shop, and it's just taking up room. If you want to bring it to your house, you can, make a bunch of videos with it or whatever. And I said, dude, let's do it. So we met up in Springfield, Illinois, which was about a 4-hour drive from me and a 4-hour drive from where he's at. And I took the thing home. That was 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 and a 16 floor, something like that. 22-inch kick plus a 12x8 with double heads on it. And some of my videos have the snare in it, which is like a 14x7 basalt, which is like a lava rock snare. So those are really interesting drums because the Pearl stuff is normal fiberglass. You have sheets and you just make layers of the sheets. The stuff from Jenkins Martin is really cool. That's the same manufacturer that made Hal Blaine's kit, which is on about 1 billion records from the 60s and 70s and 80s. And what's special about these kits is they have mandrels. So imagine a big cylinder, and you take 3 threads of fiberglass wire, and they go through an epoxy bath, and then they go over these mandrels, and the pattern goes left and right, and so you slowly form these layers to get to the thickness that you want over the mandrel. That's the size of the circumference that you need for the drum diameter. And so now the difference is, instead of having sheets, now you have a grain structure that mimics wood. And so those drums from Jenkins Martin's are the loudest, most incredible sounding concert toms I've ever heard in my life. There's a certain clarity, there's a certain beautiful element to the note that they create. And I used it to make the stupidest freaking videos that have ever been on the internet. So I put the Phil Collins "In the Air Tonight" Phil da, 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 over every song you can imagine. Songs by Queen, songs by Ace of Base. I don't even remember what other songs there were. So I made hundreds of these videos. Not hundreds, but pretty freaking close to 100. And then there was the third kit, which was the North drums. So
I was waiting for you to talk about the North drums.
So I got those from Music Around I borrowed them. I went up to the store in Milwaukee where most of the guys that I worked with, 15 years ago, they work there now. And one of them said, "Hey, we've got a North kit in the back. You want to take a look?" I said, "Yeah." I've never, up until that point, I don't think I'd ever seen one in real life. And the owner of the store was like, "Tim, get these out of here for however long. I do not have room for these giant drums in the back of my store. Take them with you today." I was like, "All right, yeah, I'll do something with them." So that was the third concert tom kit where the last of the Phil's Phil videos came from. I put it over Primus and a couple other things then. So concert toms are so wacky, but they sound, the Pearl stuff sounds different from the Jenkins Martin stuff, sounds different from the North stuff, which kind of has this horn looking design to it. And they are so silly, but they are so much freaking fun to play. A giant drum set has no place in my life, but it is like, it's like being a kid and having an entire jungle gym to yourself. It's just a joy. It's a joy.
That North stuff is what Lucky played, right? In Circle Jerks, he had
Yep.
a yellow four
Yeah,
piece, I
a big
think, in
yellow one.
those early
They've got one at the
days.
Punk Rock Museum. I guess that was his.
Yeah,
Yep,
those are
I've seen a picture of that one.
Me
those are
too.
some wild looking drums, man, for
Dude, those are
sure.
the most
And the original
ridiculous
drummer
things.
from Nirvana, the original drummer from Nirvana played those too. That's another reason why people like
Really?
them.
Oh
Yeah,
shit, I had no idea. That's crazy.
They're such an anomaly to me. I don't know if they may have had one we had a Mars Music back in the 90s, and I think they had one there, but Mars closed down in 98 or so. So I think that's the last time I saw one of those North kits.
and there's only two other companies that rival the ridiculousness of North is staccato drums, where the bass drum literally looks like you ripped off shorts from a giant cartoon character and put them on their side. It's a ridiculous looking kick drum. Yeah, and then there was a brand called Impact, and Bermuda Schwartz, who plays drums for Weird Al Yankovic,
Mm-hmm.
he had Impact drums, and they had ports in the side of the concert tom. And I feel like they had a purpose, but if you look at them, they just look like they were freaking handles. So when you're done, you just take your freaking tom by the handle, this hole in the middle of the drum, and that's how you put it away. It was, man, well, fiberglass has led to some of just the wackiest things you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
So,
Dude, I had an old set of those the wood fiberglass, and it had like this bowling ball blue finish on it, and those are like that. I think that's one of the biggest regrets, and I've letting that kit go. I kick myself in the ass. But dude, while we're on the subject of kits, man, I'd love to hear how you linked up with Franklin. And before you answer, I just have to say, I don't know if they're going to listen to this, whatever. They are making some of the most fucking beautiful, like that rose gold acrylic, like everything. Is that just one gentleman doing that stuff for the most part, or?
so it's. I think they got a few guys now, but mainly it's this guy Grady and another guy named Tim. For a long time, it was those two guys. And Grady had been building drums for the company that had been called Risen, and they were a Christian, kind of centered drum company. Guy wanted to get out of the business who owned it. Grady said, basically I want to buy the company and do my own thing with it, which is where I got involved. And Grady, I don't remember how we got connected, but eventually Grady and I started doing, 2-3 hour phone calls once every few weeks to talk about drum stuff, and it would turn into emails and blah, blah, blah. And so my involvement was talking about what does the logo look like? What does the badge look like? What does the branding look like? What is the shell? Because they wanted to do a proprietary shell. They wanted to get away from the traditional Keller VSS maple and do their own thing. So what would it look like for them to do their own shell? Which is why they landed on, they have they wound up 5-ply maple poplar alternating plies, kind of like Gretsch Brooklyn. But they do a mahogany poplar 5-ply in a similar kind of alternating style too. And beautiful shells, beautiful drums. And Tim, who is another one of the main builders there, kindly suggested that they build me a kit as a thank you for, what time I'd given them. And
Wow.
so they built me basically what happened is it's sizes that I'd always wanted that were impossible to find, particularly for kick drums. So I got a 20 by 12, 20-inch diameter, 12 depth, and then a 16 by 12, 16 diameter, 12 depth kick. The 20 by 12 is just to see what would happen. I really loved 22 by 12s, which was a size from a kit by Ludwig and WFL called the New Yorker. Essentially, you change the air column. So the same way you have a 24 or 26-inch drum where by 14, where you have this very tall drum with a very short diameter, you get a lot of punch out of that, but you get a lot of beef, a lot of low end with that too. The 22 by 12 does the same thing because you change that air column to be more similar to those big drums. I thought, well, what happens if you make it even smaller? Turned out that it creates what essentially is the biggest punch in your gut that you will ever feel. Cool sound. And then the 16 by 12 was to recreate try to recreate the sound that you hear Questlove get on D'Angelo's Voodoo record, the super bumpy 808 style thing. And other than that, it was just really standard 12 by 8, 14 by 14 toms, like an old Ludwig downbeat kit, and the matching downbeat style snare, 14 by 4, 8 lugs. Finish wise, that was the other real special part about this, and this is where it gets crazy.
Beautiful.
So one of my best friends from back home, Sahan Jayasuriya, and I are both big drum nerds. He worked at Music Around for a while too, and one of the finishes that both of us have been obsessed about for many years was Ludwig in the 70s made a student level drum set called the Standard Series. They had a bunch of really, really cool finishes, the Astro finishes, which were kind of like satin flames, kind of a moire style wave to the finish. But they had these strata finishes that were incredible. They had a blue strata finish. They had an orangey strata finish, which almost looks like the same color orange as those goldfish crackers that kids eat. And they had a lemon strata finish, which was this beautiful, like the goldiest egg yolk yellow that you've ever seen mixed with black. And I said, I want that. And we called up the one big company that makes these wraps in America. They said, we'll do it, but you have to buy, essentially to run that wrap would cost $10,000 because you'd have to make 100 sheets of it. And so we said, well, I guess we're not doing that. And so we found a local painter that they work with on their different lacquers. And that guy has, I wish I could reveal, I'll reveal off camera maybe at some point what they did, but he had the wackiest way to make the pattern that we could paint this thing over. Grady left the wood grain visible on the outer maple ply, and then he sprayed the black, and then he sprayed the black, sprayed the yellow, and then sprayed the clear. And so what you have is the yellow and the black of the lemon strata, but because the wood grain is still underneath the yellow, you have the complexity that you would still see in the strata of those old Ludwig kits. So it turned out incredible. Graduated bearing edges, full round over on the kicks, 45 round over on the toms, double 45s on the snare. Just a special, funky little kit.
Yeah, I would say so. Man, if you wouldn't mind revealing, because I gotta tell you, like after that, I love the strata finishes, but there's a lemon strata at our local shop, and what I like about yours is, from what you could at least see on internet, it's like very stark black and yellow. Some of the lemon strata that you see like in person, there's almost like a little bit of white in it, and there's some lighter parts of yellow, which I was never personally like a fan of.
Reissues, you see that the reissues, in my opinion, and I love Ludwig and the guys over there. They make some of the best drums in the world. It's the one kit that's going to my grave with me is my olive drab color. They call it Heritage Green lacquer Ludwig, which is highly modified, of course. And I've got all these Ludwig snares are the ones that I'm primarily keeping. The one that goes to the grave with me is my Black Beauty that's got my initials on it. So love Ludwig, but it's to say that I wish when they did that run of that lemon strata wrap that they had eliminated a lot more of the white and had gone with a harder yellow, just a more poppy yellow, because it's, to me, like they did a pink oyster, and that is gorgeous. They did a reissue of the pink oyster. It's incredible. They did a pink, like a pink marine pearl, if you will. Great. I wish they just would have, the same way that they make all these other colors, pops, reds, pinks, blues. I wish they would have made the yellow pop.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Lemon Strata.
Well, Franklin did it for sure. Absolutely.
100%.
Matthew.
Yes, sir.
Did you have anything that you would like to add?
No,
Any more questions?
no. I think I think I got out what I wanted to get out because, like I said earlier, it's really cool to see a different side of you. I think, going into this, I wanted to talk about, all the crazy stuff, but you're way more interesting than even your crazy side. So I thought that was really neat. So I'm glad to get to know you
Well,
like
thank
this.
you. It's
Yeah.
very kind. No, this was really nice. I appreciate you guys, the invite and being able to spend the time together. And
Man.
thanks for the, however many people are still listening to me ramble about crap at this point in the podcast. And
This
no,
has
I
probably been
appreciate
the
it all. It's very
most
kind.
this has probably been the most like nerdy episode as far as drum gear and stuff like that. So
Which I know a lot of people
a lot of
will
people like
absolutely
that.
love.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
we will go with our closer, which is questions from my kids. Um,
I need to do
and
this with my daughter too.
lately I've been having them write them down, and I don't look at them until so. I pre-apologize if anything is over the top. Obviously, if it's too much, I won't read it. All right, so let's see here. I've watched some of the videos with the girls. So this is my 7-year-old is what does a microphone taste like? Those are her favorite ones where you
Well, I've had a few mics in my mouth, unfortunately. And typically the grill is off of them, so I am eating what is foam and electricity. And I will tell you, neither tastes very good. The foam, I've had what is probably 50-year-old asbestos foam in my mouth. That tasted, I don't know if it was asbestos, but it was just some goofy, foam. But foam that is 50 years old and falling apart on your tongue is one of the most disgusting flavors I've ever encountered in my life. I will tell you that.
So nothing like grape cold medicine.
No, much worse, much worse.
I think that would be her comparison. And all right, is Timbo short for Timothy?
So I like that one. That's really nice. I've never had that before. No one's ever said that one.
It is now.
Oh yeah, I love it. So when I was 5 or 6, I started hanging out with this kid, Eddie Colmos, and Eddie, me and him became friends because we both watched the show from the '90s called Beast Wars, which was an incredible cartoon that I think was trying to rip on Transformers, but it was awesome. Anyway, so Eddie's dad, I'm not kidding you, his real name was Bear, like the animal, and he was a short, stout, muscled out bear of a man. He was a football player, just a brutal dude, and he had this really gravelly voice. I mean, he was just a character. He was incredible, very nice guy too. And so Bear started calling me Timboni Macaroni, and then Timboni Macaroni shortened to Timboni, and then it eventually stuck at Timbo. So from the time I was about 5, 6 on out, I was Timbo. That was it. But Timbo is short for Timboni Macaroni.
Okay, which I think she'll probably like better. Anyway, so, and I say this after every series of questions. I think it's so funny that, like, sometimes they don't even know, who some of these people are, and they just rifle out these questions. But it's so awesome that usually, at least one of them will get a very serious answer, which just makes it so much better. So, yeah, dude. With that's the closing segment. I really appreciate you coming on, man, and it's been great. We used to talk a lot more, obviously, before that huge time difference. So to be able to catch up, and also, too, man, thank you. Like, this is probably one of the most personal episodes, and I think people will really latch onto it. So again, man, I appreciate you being so open and sharing so much about your life. And I think all of us would probably agree that we support you no matter what way you go with the rest of your life, man. We want you to be happy, but just come back to drums every year or two and hammer on them for a little bit for us, please.
Well, like I said, I think I'm always going to be a drummer. I don't know what that looks like. I think once I set up my life here and figure that out, maybe it's going to be different. Maybe the feelings will be different. There's a lot of stress right now. If anybody is looking for a remote employee, I have American citizenship, I have French working rights, and I would really like to remain in Nantes, France. But I realize that I might need to move to a more international city. If anybody has anybody they can connect me with, or if there's anybody who's an employer out there looking for somebody, that is the hardest struggle out here.
I was going to bring that up, man. What's the best way to reach you?
So the best way to reach me is tim.baltes@gmail.com is my email address. I'm at timbaltes.com, timbaltes.com. With my resumes on the website, there's contact information everywhere, plenty of ways to get at me. And any connections, any potential jobs are very, 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 very appreciated. So thanks again for having me, guys. And thanks to everybody for listening.
Absolutely, buddy.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I know it's late there.
Oh, it's only 6 p.m., baby. We're ready to party now, so get cracking.
All right, so we'll say this. We'll thank you one more time, and then we're going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then you're going to tell me how they did that fucking London Strata.
All right.
All right. Bye, Tim.
Bye.